I didn't realize until we started talking was that you run something called the Pope Francis Center in downtown Detroit. Why don't you explain what you do?
We weren't actually changing people's situations. We were simply keeping them alive, and which is important, and providing for their needs, which is really important. But I wanted something transformational. I wanted to see these folks find housing and live like everybody else, to have a roof over their head, to have, a home, a place where they call home.
All right. I am very excited to be here with Father Tim McCabe. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
This is it's a week overdue. You're healthy now, though.
I am.
You were dying a week ago when we were going to do this.
Picked up something in the airport.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do.
I liked, though, that when you called me that morning, you said, "Hey, I'm really not feeling good, but I can be there if you want me to. I'll just pop a couple of Dayquil." I'm going, no, this room is too small. I can't handle all those germs.
Yeah.
So thanks for being willing to even come when you were sick, but I'm glad that you're good and healthy.
Probably better this way.
I think so.
Yeah.
I did shake your hand when you got here, so I don't want to have to burn this thing or anything like that. So, Father Tim is a newer friend to myself and my wife and our extended family, and didn't realize when I called him up out of the blue that he was going to be such a big shot, to be honest. So, want me to tell that story of how we met?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, not too long ago, I got a call from my aunt, letting me know that my uncle, who was in the hospital, had taken a turn for the worse, and that the hospital had called and said, "Hey, you got to get down here." So she called me and my wife, and we jumped in the car, went down, and it was very clear that things were not good, and so we're praying, we're standing around them, doing everything we think we should, and I said, we got to call a priest. And was it a Saturday or something? It was a Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah. And so we pick up the phone. We're in downtown Detroit, called 10 or 12 different churches. Didn't get a hold of anybody. And long story short, I open up an app for the Detroit Athletic Club because I said, there's a lot of clergy down at the Detroit Athletic Club. So I'm going to look up anybody that says Father in their name or Monsignor or whatever. And so I started calling and texting people out of there. And Father Tim was the first guy to call me back. And he said, you introduced yourself. He said, I'm an hour out. Can you hang on that long? I said, yep. And he rushed over and he came to be with us. You want to tell a little bit of that story more? I feel like I'm sucking all the air out of the room here. You could talk about it, and I'll fill in some details too.
I was in the gym minding my own business when I got this call from you. No.
Where were you? I
was
were
in
you?
the gym. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I normally don't pick up numbers that I don't recognize, and you weren't in my contact list. So I was like, I should take this, see what it is. And, what an honor and a privilege to be with your family during that moment. I mean, obviously it's a heartbreaking moment, and for all of you, but it was very beautiful to see the way your family rallied around your uncle. And, it's a difficult time during that transition, but it's really a privilege to be with you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And we asked that right during the most important parts of the conversation too, where, but when you came there, you basically told me that it was an honor, and I thought that was really cool words that you used. But you didn't know me, you didn't know my uncle, you didn't know our family, and when you talked to my uncle, who was unconscious at the time, I mean, the way you spoke to him was like you knew him your whole life, or just with just such dignity. I don't even know how to explain it, but it was just very normal the way you spoke to him and what you did, and I just really appreciated that. And then you went on to say, "Do you want me to stay?" And I said, I already interrupted your Saturday, no, you don't. And you said, "Well, I'm going to stay." Even though I said, no, don't stay. So I'm going to stay. And then you looked at me and you said, what's on your mind? Something looks like something's still kind of eating you here. And I told you, like, hey, I wasn't sure about the way that the hospital had explained some of the phenomenons that his body was going through during the early hours of the morning, that we were there for 5 hours and we hadn't seen it replicate. And so I thought for sure you were going to put your hand on me and say, my son, it comes a time for everyone when, it's just time to let go. And you didn't do that. He said, well, let's get that doctor over here and let's question him. Yeah. I said, okay. And you acted as my proxy there.
Well, it's probably the most difficult decision any family ever has to make is when do you take them off life support? And I know the agony, and I've been with people when they agonize over that decision, and I could tell that was, you weren't 100% sure. And so I wanted to make sure that you had the information that you needed to feel peaceful about that. And we got it. I thought the doctor was compassionate and clear about what was going on with you or with your uncle. And I think that brought you a lot of peace. And then what happened?
And then what happened was all of a sudden, all the lights and buzzers and everything start going off in the room, and everything that doctor had explained that happened at 4 a.m. and throughout the night started happening right there. And so I said, thank you very much. We have our answer. And so, for anybody who's looking for a direct line into Jesus, Father Tim's got it. He was able to call that one in. So I appreciated that. But I said, no, I don't know what that was. If that was, if that was God, if that was my uncle telling us or what it was, but it was amazing. And it, for the worst moment, it brought us, so much peace. So, so thanks for being there.
And then what a way to go out of this world. Like, I just here your uncle is in this hospital bed, just surrounded by love. You could feel the love. You could feel God's presence in the room, just loving him and holding him and being with him as he made that transition. And I'm like, man, everybody should be lucky enough to have that.
Oh, thank you. Well, thanks for being there. And then you put a little more icing on the cake and you said, hey, if you need a priest for a funeral or you need me to do anything, remember that at this point we had known each other probably 38 minutes or so. And you realize that we were, my aunt and her family live up in White Lake and we live up in Rochester. So, you live and work in downtown Detroit. So here you are then offering to come do whatever's necessary up in our neck of the woods. So, for somebody who's living out their faith, you were just like checking the boxes like a total rock star. And we just really appreciated that. And it was kind of funny because lo and behold, the priest from our parish was out of town, and the church calls us up and says, hey, by chance, would you happen to have somebody that could come and do the rosary at the funeral home? And I said, I might know a guy.
I know a guy.
So, so then you're probably thinking, oh, why did I publish that phone number in the Detroit Athletic Club directory? But no, so thank you. So then you came up and did that. And
well, thank you for letting me be a part of that, because really, that's a real gift for me. I know the gratitude that you feel, but I feel like I get so much from those experiences. And so I'm grateful for your family and to allow me in one of those really hard moments in your lives. And,
well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I did get a call from Gene Lavasco though, saying that don't try to hog him because that he's your guy or you're his guy. So, then from there we got a chance to, we were with our younger boys, and we called you up and said, we'd like to come down and see, what it is that you do, because what I didn't realize until we started talking was that you run something called the Pope Francis Center in downtown Detroit, and you actually do a little more than just that. But why don't you explain what you do?
Well, the Pope Francis Center was called the St. Peter and Paul Warming Center when I arrived. This is my first assignment after I was ordained in 2015. So I got to come back to the city that I love, where I grew up, to doing the work that I love. So I was thrilled to be able to come back. But initially it was just a day center for people who are experiencing homelessness. And so we provide kind of for their basic needs. We have, hot, nutritious meals. We have showers. We have laundry. We have medical care. So if folks are downtown and they're homeless and they need any of those things, they come spend the mornings with us and we provide what we have to offer them. So when I arrived, I found this amazing ministry that with a culture of real love and respect and dignity for the people who were coming to us. And I love that. And I wanted to encourage that and continue to build upon that. But what I didn't like as I spent time there was that it was very transactional, that we weren't actually changing people's situations. We were simply keeping them alive, and which is important, and providing for their needs, which is really important. But I wanted something transformational. I wanted to see these folks find housing and live like everybody else, to have a roof over their head, to have, a home, a place where they call home. So I went around the country. I looked at 27 different programs in 11 different cities, kind of benchmarking best practices, because I knew other people were being effective in treating chronic homelessness. I wanted to see what they were doing. So I came back from that trip. I made 2 trips actually, but I started to build out the concept of what is now called our bridge housing facility. So it's a building built with trauma-informed approach to the building itself, so that people with trauma would feel safe in it, and the care we would provide them would be trauma-informed. So we're understanding homelessness as a result of trauma. And that has been consistently true across my many years of working with this population. So we did that. We went and began to build out this program. And I really believed, like, at the core of what my experience has been and what other people showed me, that if you provide a safe and loving environment, people will heal in that space. So we built it, and a year ago, last September, we opened our doors to our first residents, and we've been going strong ever since. And what I told my team when we opened our doors is all that research goes out the window, and we become a big classroom, and we let our residents teach us what they need to heal and to become self-independent.
Yeah. Was this your idea? Like, I don't know how this works in the, you're a Jesuit. So I don't even understand how that works in your structure. Did you just have this idea and said, I'm going to go do this? Or did somebody from high above say, Tim, we want you to go build something? What was the
bridge housing?
What was or just the whole mission? So like you got placed into the St. Peter and Paul place where parish where the day center is. And then this idea, like, was it just your idea? And then you just said, I'm going to go do this?
So initially, after I was ordained, I have a conversation with my superiors, and they say, where's your heart? Where do you want to be? And I always wanted to be with the poor. It's where I've always been before I was a Jesuit. And so I'm like, send me where there's a need. And they gave me 3 options to pray about. And I ultimately came back with all 3 of them and said, I'll go wherever you want. Send me where the need is greatest. One was on the Indian reservation, Pine Ridge in South Dakota. One was in a refugee resettlement camp in Eritrea, and then this place. And so they decided this was the place. They prayed. I discern, you discern, they decide.
So that's where they put you.
Right.
And then how does this thing blossom like that?
So it was the week before Christmas in 2016, and fentanyl had gotten into the heroin downtown. And we saw 5 deaths within a couple of days of people that we really loved. And, we knew from coming into the center. One was a young woman that, had been a severe alcoholic, but she ended up switching to, or introducing heroin to her addiction. And she died. She went into the law school next door to us and went into the bathrooms and shot up and died in there. Another guy shot up in our bathrooms and died in our bathroom, and another in front of the church. So we as a staff were just reeling from the loss. And so we came together to process it and talk about it. And, somebody, maybe me or somebody else at the table said, it doesn't have to be this way. And that statement started us thinking about, well, what can it be then if it doesn't have to be that way? We're like, people come to zero homelessness in other places in the world. Why can't we? I'm like, well, how hard could it be?
And then that became your famous last words, right?
Yeah. So I called the city and said, what is being done and where's the gap? Where's the delta between the homeless and the housing? And they said chronic homelessness there was this gap in services for people who have been on the streets for multiple years. So that launch, I'm like, well, and then I went to my superiors and I'm like, I want to do something transformational. And, I've prayed about it and I think this is the right course for us. And my superior and his consultants believed that was from God, the desire to do that. So they said, go, and with our blessing. So I started the research, and then we're doing the feasibility studies, what's possible, and I was told we hired a fundraising consulting firm and they said, you'll never be able to do that. They said, you have no database, you have no alumni, you have no experience in running capital campaigns. You'll be lucky if you can hit 2 or 3 million.
And you said, how hard could it be?
Yeah. And then they said, in your gala, you will never be able to raise more than $500,000. That the size of your organization. And I said, you're wrong. And they're like, we're experienced fundraisers and this is it's our professional opinion. Yeah. And I said, well, I'm going to prove you wrong.
Wow. So how much did you raise?
40 million, just under 40 million.
Oh,
the building started off at 20 million, and then COVID hit and we weren't going to be able to raise money because we couldn't meet with people. And God just continued to bless me with, there's miracles. I mean, I could go on, I could spend the whole 2 hours or hour with you talking about the miracles that happened. But
you got to tell us a couple of them.
Okay. I'll tell you this one, which is one of the bigger ones when it comes to fundraising. So the pandemic has hit, the state is closed down. We have moved all of our operations out into the parking lot. We have no more volunteers because we can't bring people into the building. And we are just pushing food out the door and trying to keep people alive. And we have some medical guys, a saint woman, Dr. Asha, who came down and did medical for the guys out in the parking lot. So we keep trying to figure out, what do I need? I need circus tents to put this out in the parking lot. I need food. I need a shower trailer. We're trying to figure out, okay, how do we do this? In the meantime, there was no vaccine, right? So we're told spray, there weren't the masks. We were running out of the N9 or KN9 masks. So they're like, spray them with bleach. Well, you only do that once when you realize that's not. And then they're like, put them in the oven for a certain amount of time. And then that didn't work. So, we were just kind of making it up as we went and trying to keep people alive and safe. And I get this call in the middle of the afternoon. And this woman on the other end, she said, I am from this foundation out in California. And I found you on a Google search. What do you need? And I'm like, is this my sister? This is no time for praying, And I said, I need a shower trailer, which was the most immediate thing that I could think of at the time. And she said, well, how much is that? I said, $150,000. She said, I'll call you right back. 5 minutes later, she calls me back. She said, I'm sending you $200,000. Get your shower trailer and any moving costs that comes with it, and treat your staff to a meal because you guys are doing amazing work.
Wow.
So they sent the money. We got the shower trailer. Then as time went on, we were getting into this winter. And so I kept ringing the alarm bells with the mayor's office. I'm like, we got to be indoors somewhere. So we got into now Huntington Place, the convention center downtown. So they gave us the bottom floor. So we spread out in there and we made it work. So when the shower trailer came, I had somebody follow me around with their camera phone. And I'm like, Mr. and Mrs. Burke, here is the shower trailer arriving. And this is our medical clinic in the building. Here's our kitchen. Here's where we feed people. So I just showed him as a way of saying thank you. And he called me and he's like, what's your what's your vision for the future? I want to talk to you. So we got on a Zoom call and I told him about the idea for the bridge housing. And I said, we are starting a capital campaign, but we've had to stop it because I can't meet with people. He said, well, how much money do you have to raise? And I said, we have at that time, 14 million left to raise. And he said, well, how about if I give you half? I'm like, half of what? He said, how about if we give you 7 million? And I just started crying on the Zoom call. I was like, and he's like, yeah, we can do that for you. So fast forward, it took months for me to get out to thank them personally. I finally got out to their home in California. They've never to this day set foot in Detroit. They've never seen the Pope Francis Center building that they helped build. So I spent the weekend with them. They're very nice and gracious people. As I'm leaving, he said, well, I'm sure that the supply chain disruptions and the labor shortages are increase your costs. And I said, yep, they have. How much do you have to raise now? And I said, 12 million. He said, well, how about if we give you 6? I said, 6 more? So in total, they've given me over $13 million. They gave it all in 1 year. It wasn't even spread over years.
Wow.
And they have a foundation. Their daughter was killed in a car accident when she was 16. They set it up in her memory, in her honor. And they tried to do things that were important to her. And poverty was an important issue to her. She was on the debate team in California and debated issues around homelessness and poverty. So they become close friends. But there's no way we could have raised the money had they not stepped in. And they found us on a Google. God's hand was with us the whole time. I could go on the other stories. Things that happened that, I just knew God was blessing this effort and that we were going to have what we need. And we did.
Who was the first person to come to the table?
The Jesuits came in with $1 million right at the beginning. Jim Farley and Ford Motor Company came in at $1 million. Trying to think who were the other. We had like 8 million.
And how did you find these guys? Because obviously you didn't hire that consulting firm that told you that they couldn't do it.
No. Well, some friend of Jim Farley's that worked with him was volunteering, and she said, I want him to meet you. He's new in Detroit. He wasn't CEO at the time. He was, but at an executive level. And so I said, fine, set up a lunch. I'm happy to meet with him. So I went to his office and, he had a connection because his grandfather brought him to our warming center when he was a teenager. And so he volunteered there because his grandfather really wanted him to recognize that he was in a place of privilege and that the world was bigger than what the world that he lived in.
Sure.
And so now he does the same thing. He's brought his children in. He's formed them to be aware of the world. And so we became fast friends. His cousin was Chris Farley, the comedian.
Yeah.
And so, he had a real heart for addiction and the issues and the struggles of people struggling with addiction. He was a big brother when he lived out in California. So he had already had a formation around, caring for people, understanding addiction. So when he came and volunteered, we stood in the serving line and we were looking out at the folks that have come for a meal, and he understood in a way that was very intimate to him. And so he's been a big champion of our work. And so how does that happen? I say it's God. Maybe other people would give a different explanation, but for me, God has always just, whenever we needed something, somebody showed up like you.
That's fantastic.
I've been hearing a lot lately about the knock. When an employee knocks on your office door and says, got a minute? And you immediately know it's some sort of IT incident. But Oxium IT can help. Whether you're having a problem, need consulting, an upgrade, or a managed IT approach, they focus on preventing cyber attacks and proactive solutions that deliver results. My friend Matt Loria and everyone at Oxium are ready to help before or after you get the knock. Visit Oxium.com and let Oxium IT help you outsmart chaos.
So when we came down to the center, and you mentioned the word trauma-informed, or the phrase trauma-informed, that was something that really hit me because my wife and I have spent some time working with our church and with previous churches with McRest. And McRest is for those who don't know, it's basically different churches open up their doors to homeless folks that come into a program, and then they stay a week or two at a time at each different place. So we've had some experiences there, and so much of what we experienced was people who had addiction problems, people who had mental illness. And when we came to your center, to the Pope Francis Center, which I need to make sure that we explain this. When you were raising that money, you didn't have the building. You had the warming center in downtown, not even the land at that time.
That's exactly right.
Okay. So people were really buying in early to the vision.
Yeah.
But by the time I got to see it, obviously it's built. There's people living there. There's people working there. And when you walked me around, you explained this whole trauma-informed concept and wide hallways, because people who've had different traumas can have different responses of being felt to be felt too closed in.
That's right.
Only one story, because the going up in the stories can make them experience anxiety or whatnot. Talk about a little bit about that, and maybe where did you learn about that whole element of things? Because I think people, if you haven't been around the homeless, you get this idea that, they did something wrong, or they, whatever.
Bad life choices.
Bad life choices, whatever. And, yes, I will say a lot of the folks that we worked with had a lot of bad life choices. But it wasn't all just that. It was also bad life circumstances on top of it. So talk about trauma-informed buildings and just behaviors even a little bit for us.
Yeah. So I think I began to, without having that language, like as I got, early in I was in my early 20s, and I started volunteering at a soup kitchen, and I started to get to know the folks that were coming there. And over time and over relationship, I began to hear their stories, and I realized that they had some pretty horrible things happen to them in their lives. And, I was always in awe of their vulnerability, their willingness to talk about that stuff with me. And, but I didn't have the language of like trauma informed, but I knew that's what was instinctively, I knew that's what was happening.
Sure.
And that's what landed people homeless. Then over, I think right around the time I came back to Detroit and started this work, I began to hear that term, trauma-informed care. And so I started doing the research. I'm like, oh, this makes perfect sense. This is exactly what it is. So then going around the country and researching best practices, benchmarking those things, I recognize that the people who are most effective in treating the homelessness were taking a trauma-informed approach. So I started just gleaning from different programs from around the country. It's like, okay, what does that mean? What does it look like? I pulled some stuff from, my daughter is a trauma therapist, and she went to Michigan School of Psychology, and they have a lot of trauma classes. And so beginning to recognize how buildings play into that, how colors play into that, natural lighting, excuse me, those are all things that we were trying to implement into the building structure, as you mentioned earlier. And then just the approach of saying, okay, if trauma is at the core of mental illness and addiction, then how do we treat that? And so begins by providing a space where people feel safe. They feel, that their needs are going to be met, and we start to treat the trauma. So the first thing that happens when we identify somebody for our bridge housing facility is they agree to participate in our program. They go to the medical clinic on our campus and they get a full physical. And we start to address the medical issues that they're facing because a lot of them have never seen a doctor or haven't seen a doctor in decades. So they use the ER as like a primary care. So it's only when they're critically in need that they end up in any kind of a medical facility. And so a lot of them end up going to the hospital from our building because they're carrying around some pretty serious health issues. So that's where it starts. And then they go to a psychiatrist, and our psychiatrist on staff does an evaluation and they start to understand what their mental health needs are. And if there are need for medication, they begin to introduce medications if they aren't already on them, and making sure that they're titrated correctly and that they it's the right meds at the right dosage. Excuse me. And that's an important part. They have to agree that while they're in our program, they have to be sober. So if people are in need of detox or a 21-day program, we have partnerships with other programs and we send them there first. So they have to be sober and they have to test clean the day they come in. If they don't, they go into a program. So
did you, by the way, have all of these pieces figured out early on, or were some of these learned over time? Because the whole idea of, you can hear of a program where it's like, you have to be sober to come here. Well, okay, thank you. But if you don't give me the way to do that, then what are you doing? Sending the person back out to the street?
Yeah.
You've made that part of your process that it's like, okay, we actually offer that, through a partner, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, I saw a lot while benchmarking best practices. I saw some things I would never do, like in that around addiction in particular, like there are low barrier entry places where you don't have to be sober to be there. And that for emergency shelters, that kind of makes sense, that people, and we have a outdoor shelter in the back of our facility where that's low barrier. They don't have to be clean and sober to be in that space.
Okay.
It's a space for them to stay safe from elements and have a place to come.
But even to build on that piece real quick, is that the outdoor shelter that you have, part of that is that the part of the space that you showed me where some people just are not comfortable being in a building because they've either been homeless so long or whatever their trauma is or their anxieties or their mental illness is causing that fear or that inability to walk through the threshold. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And I think to both of those questions, there was one program in San Antonio. I took a lot from different programs, but in San Antonio, I think it was called Haven for Hope. They had I don't know what they had, 100 acres. They had a huge piece of property and they had everything that you could want on that property. So from detox to inpatient treatment to government offices for ID restoration to housing and permanent support housing and different types of housing, everything was right there. So then they had an outdoor shelter. And I thought, oh, that's interesting because I know people who won't come indoors, but they were trying to keep people cool. So they had misters and fans going where I'm like, we need to keep people warm. So we put in heated sidewalks and radiant heat above them so that people wouldn't freeze to death.
Yeah.
So I kind of gleaned from that. But the idea of having everything in one place, like so often we have these outreach workers that the city or different nonprofits send out to the street to meet with folks that are on the streets. And what happens is they come up during the night and they're like, they don't know who they are and they start talking to them. And so they are very resistant to that kind of interaction. So they'll come in to me the next day and they're like, Father Tim, some guy came up to me asking me about if I want housing. I don't know who this guy is. So then the process is once they do get people signed up, then they have to keep following up with them. So there's different steps they have to go through and they can't find them because they're mobile and they're transient. And so I'm like, let's get them all into one place. And so let the services come to them. So we're not running around the city trying to find people. So that was part of the thinking. And then like medical care, I was thinking we need a solid medical team on our staff. And then it's called a federally qualified health clinic. It's CHAZ clinic. They are mandated by the federal government to provide healthcare for people who are indigent or low income. So I just happened to meet a doc on the street and we had coffee and he's like, we would love to extend our footprint. This is another one of those miracles, right? He said, we're over on Southwest Detroit. Henry Ford Hospital is, Midtown. We need something in between. And I'm like, if I build the clinic, will you run it? And they were like, we would love to do that. So we entered into a contract and I built the clinic. And it's like a place where you would, it would be like an urgent care. And you've walked through it, so but also
it feels like a regular doctor's office. I mean, which I also think adds to the whole dignity of everything of, you're not giving these people the scraps. You're giving them as close to what we who would watch this or we who are in this building would consider it a normal doctor's appointment, that's what you're giving them.
Yeah. And that's the whole idea behind the nice rooms, the nice building, the way it's designed is I want them to realize that we see them as human beings that deserve to live in nice places. Because too often the city or others who, the system is set up so they'll find them housing, but they're in bad neighborhoods. I mean, they're in buildings where the post office won't deliver mail because it looks abandoned.
Right.
There's drug dealing going on. And, so they're like, they'd rather take their chances on the streets than live in those buildings. So I want them to recognize their own dignity as a child of God. And so we provide them that space and we say, you deserve this.
That's fantastic.
And as you're staying here, start to think of yourself in a place like this when you leave here because you deserve it.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit more about the center too, and the classrooms and the barber shop and, the cafeteria, of course. But let's take a little break from that for a second and just talk about, you mentioned, that you work with your daughter. You had a whole life before becoming a priest too. Yeah. And the cool thing is that it's very thematic. I mean, everything you did was helping others. So, talk about your career and life up until, becoming a priest too, and show people a little bit about that side of you.
Yeah. I think I was introduced, to, being involved with the care of others through the Muscular Dystrophy Association. I had a neighbor who was very involved in, one summer, in my high school years, she needed a strong back to take wheelchairs in and out of the van and help with the lifting of these folks. And, so she asked me to come with her. And so I did. And then I went to camp with the folks that had dystrophy. And, I really started to feel like, a connection to, I felt most authentically myself. I don't think I could have said that at the time, but that's what was happening was when I am not focused on myself and what I want and focusing on the needs of others, that I felt like I was, that I was my best self, that I was a better person for it. So I kind of followed that trajectory. So I ended up doing a lot of nonprofit work. Before I entered the Jesuits, I ran a refugee resettlement project. I worked with a construction inner city home repair for folks that couldn't afford having their houses fixed.
Did you do the construction side of things too?
Yeah, I did roofing and,
Are you pretty good?
I was okay when I was younger. Roofing is for young men. I learned some things. I learned how to do it. We kind of learned on the job. And, so that kind of thing. I ran a program called the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, which is like a domestic Peace Corps. And so I learned a lot about running nonprofits but also making sure that my life was always about service. And, meaningful work is one of the keys to happiness, right? So
yeah, right.
I've always been very happy because of that.
And you never worried about money?
No, I don't have a lot of needs, so I'm a pretty simple guy. So I like a good vacation once in a while, but
were you always like that as a kid too?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up with slender means. I mean, we didn't have a lot of money. I had to work for what I needed and started with a paper route when I was 12 and worked ever since. So, I mean, that was not uncommon in my blue collar neighborhood that I grew up in. And yeah, so I was given a really strong work ethic and, but also didn't have a lot of, I didn't have any desire to become the next Sam Altman or Elon Musk.
But it's interesting. You've done such a good job of being a CEO or being a presence of representing your organization too. We had you as a guest of ours downtown at a Cranes event, and it was in the new Hudson building. And excuse me. And you walked in, you said hello, and then you must have known. I said 100, but maybe 30, 40 people. You knew a lot of people in that room, and they knew you. And so did you ever set out to be this well-connected guy on top of all of it?
No, nor did I realize that would be part of the job. I just wanted to find a solution to homelessness. And, the research that I did, I think really mattered because I came up with a solution to a problem that everybody could see. If you're anywhere near downtown, and even not downtown, anywhere in our state, you see people panhandling, you see the problem. Sure. And if you're downtown, you're stepping over literally and figuratively bodies as you're on your way into work. So like people saw it and they heard what I was proposing and people got behind it.
Well, I think because it finally feels like when you start to hear about something like what you're doing, I mean, think about the anecdotal story of, somebody's at the side of the expressway and we got their sign or whatever, and you give them $5, and sometimes the person in the seat next to you says, why would you do that? They're just going to go buy booze with it. And, they can judge, they can do whatever. And you have your right to give them money and hope that it does some good. But, I think we all feel the frustration of whether you're the person giving the money, kind of knowing maybe it buys them one meal or maybe it buys them one drink. Either way, it's not fixing the problem. Yeah. And so I think that's what feels so good about getting behind what you're doing is you've taken so much action and given people an outlet to go, okay, wait, I think I can actually affect change here, versus just waiting for the government to do something. Right. That doesn't do it. Right. And the government system is broken. I mean, it just doesn't, it's not focused on solutions. And that frustrates the heck out of me. I got involved in some of the work that, bringing HUD funding into the city. And what happens is that the government needs a lot of data in order to justify distributing this kind of money. Okay. And so the nonprofits all start collecting data. And so what happens is we're all driven towards, trying to get the money as opposed to driven towards solutions. And we're competing with one another. So those dollars are finite. So everybody in the nonprofit sector is all fighting for the same dollars. And so instead of working together and getting out of our silos, we're competing and we're chasing dollars rather than trying to find solutions. And that's where the system really breaks down. Plus, I think what happens oftentimes is folks sitting in Washington will look at a problem like homelessness and say, let's try this. So for a long time it was transitional housing, so kind of what we're doing. And then they said, no more transitional housing. We're only going to give a little bit to that. We're going to do housing first, which is you get people in their own house first and then address the presenting issues that are causing homelessness, like mental illness or addiction. And that works fine for a lot of people, but it's templating an approach to a very complicated and complex problem. So not everybody responds the same to housing first or to transitional housing. Like what I said from the beginning is we're going to do this with private dollars. We're not going to take public money, and we're going to work towards solutions. And we're going to work with anybody that will work with us. So we were a non-competitor to the other service providers, and we were able to create the program and to say it's trauma informed, it's individualized care, recognizing that everybody's got a different story and they have different needs. And, there's some similarities, but in some, like Housing First works for a lot of people. It doesn't work for the chronically homeless because they habituated a lifestyle of being on the streets. And it's as hard for them over time to move back indoors as it would be for us to end up on the streets. It's just, they've gotten, habitually homeless. I mean, I never heard that terminology either until just now. And they have been in survival mode for so long that that's all they know. After a time, that's all they know. It's like, where's my next meal? Like time doesn't matter anymore. They don't have to be on a schedule. They have to know when to go, where to be to get food. It's kind of that survival thing. And so we try to deconstruct that at the Pope Francis Center and say, you don't need to worry about surviving. You're going to have your food. You're going to have your housing. You're going to live here in a nice place. And
we have, like you said, the classrooms. We have a curriculum that we require of the folks that are living there, and we're trying to give them the skills, all the skills that they need, along with work, as much as we can help influence their work.
You have the do dental work down there too?
Dental.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was just thinking about that with the, when you think about the things that these people are learning to live with, right? We wouldn't live with it for a day. We'd be calling the after hours number at our dentist.
That's right.
Right. And they're living with that. And then it just becomes a part of them. So when you talk about habitual homelessness, there's also this habitual acceptance of the shit that comes along with it.
Yeah.
Right. All of the terrible things that are happening to their body, and, whether it's a tooth or a foot or whatever.
That's right.
How do they just get used to that? Like maybe walk us through a story of maybe what a typical story arc looks like of somebody who ends up, they're middle class, lower middle class, whatever they might be, where they start off, but they're in a home, they're in a family. Walk through like an example story of how someone ends up on the streets and then ends up in that habitual homeless pattern.
Well, like I said, there's no typical way, but
or maybe just one that people could get an understanding of, that they weren't just lazy or crazy or stupid.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I would say that during the polar vortex, when the temperatures become dangerous to be outdoors through the winter, we had a guy. So when that happens, we set up an emergency shelter, and that means that people can come and sleep in our gymnasium. When we were at Huntington Place in the convention center, we set up a room for people that could stay. And I get a call, so we have this at Huntington Place, we have this room that we have set up as an emergency shelter. And this guy, I get a call from the security. This guy's trying to leave the building. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. So should we let him leave? And so I came upstairs and he said, hey, I work at a car wash. And he said, I have to take 3 buses to get there. I've got to leave now in order to get there on time. Well, it's really cold out. He said, I take the bus, I'll be fine. So I can't stop him. So he left. And at the end of the day, he came back and his feet had gotten wet. And so standing at the bus stop, waiting for a bus, his feet froze, and he had frostbite. And so by the time he got back, his feet were blue. So we had to take him to the hospital, and he lost both of his feet. And here's a guy that, is really trying to make it work. He's trying to get to his job on time. He's taking 3 buses to get to work. So the idea that folks are lazy or somehow, always making bad life choices, not most, but a lot of the guys that come to us on a daily basis, they've had some kind of, there's the trauma, but there's also often a catastrophic financial event, right? So one guy I'm thinking about had, he was taking care of his mom during COVID. He had to stop working because she was dying after she passed, and he went back to work. He didn't have a job anymore, which is entry-level jobs often is the case. Excuse me. And so, he didn't have a job. He got behind in his house, the spiral happens. And so they don't have a safety net. A lot of times when you live in poverty or close to poverty, there's no, you can't go to a family member and say, can you cover my rent for a couple months so I get back on my feet? There's just nothing there. So he ended up homeless, and then, the thing spirals, right? So we get him on a list for housing through the system, the government. And because of his age and because he doesn't have any serious disabilities, he waits for almost 2 years to get housing. So in the meantime, he's losing hope. And they keep saying, you're on the list, you're going to get housing, just wait. But he's sentenced to the streets because he's got no other options. So the more he loses hope, the more the streets have its impact on him, the survival mode, the violence that happens on the streets. He starts using street drugs and gets into heroin and crack and whatever else. And so, the whole thing just spirals for him. And had he had a clear path and maybe a little bit more support, that may or may not have come to that. But he ultimately didn't make it because he died of an overdose and right before he got housing. So, the other thing, when you talk about middle class, like we see a lot more young people on the streets today, and it is the classic, what's the family that the opioid, Oxycontin, the slack.
So,
anyways, the family, the pharmaceutical company, these kids, they're like, a number of them were in sports, torn ACL, did something, got on Oxycontin, went through withdrawals when the script went out, and then ended up, from there to heroin. And, these were, good kids in middle class, stable families who are now homeless and on the streets, and their family desperately trying to help them, end up getting to the point where they recognize they can't help them, and they stop providing things that they need because it's just making matters worse. So, there's a lot of stories like that, but that's kind of the path of many people that you see on the streets. But none of them had childhoods where they're like, I hope I grow up and become homeless.
Right.
Yeah. They all had dreams.
Wasn't their dream to do that. How do you manage this? Obviously this entity that you're running is, it's a sizable organization at this point. How are you making sure, because you're obviously doing it, but how do you make sure that you still know the names of the people that are your guests in the facility?
I can't remember my own name half the time. So, it's the more time I spend with them, the easier it is to know their names and their stories. And I think it's important. It's important for me to be able to do my job, that I have to be in relationship with them. And I feel like, again, like I think I'm a better person when I'm in relationship with the folks that are, are on the other side of this project.
What's a day in the life look like for you?
There is no typical day in the life. It's
pick yesterday.
We had a graduation ceremony. We had 5 guys get housing. So we started the day with we have a party for them, and we do a blessing in our chapel with them, and we pray over them. And it's really moving for all of us. And they get to talk about their experience, which is always like, it just puts a little gasoline in our tanks when when we hear them talk about their experience and what it's meant to be at our place. So that happens. It's a lot of donor calls and strategy sessions, meeting with my team about what of our program needs to be updated or changed as we learn. We're relatively new at this, but we have a core curriculum. We provide classes around emotional intelligence, financial literacy, conflict resolution, anything that we can help them to give them the skills to live independently from our place. So we run that during the day, and then the evening for those people who are in recovery, we have AA and NA meetings in our building. So, meeting with the staff teams, hearing what, the issue of the day is, and then really reaching out. I'm much more outward facing now that I'm the president and CEO. And so I do a lot of meetings, speaking engagements, meeting with city officials. And, right now it's like, how do we solve for the housing crisis? Because we have a program that we can get people off of the streets and stabilized and ready to live independently. But if we don't have housing, and the low income housing market in the country is at a crisis level right now. So, that's kind of where we're stuck. So we have some land around us. And so we're talking about, what does it look like to get into the housing business? Is it tiny houses? What's the model? What's most effective? I think, the dream is that we give them something that they can pay into and then become owners of, so that, obviously equity is, that's where you end generational poverty. It's when you start to be able to build up some equity in a house. So I don't know, we're also businesses. Like, how do we get entry level businesses up and running on our property. So, is it a pizza parlor or a laundromat or a coffee shop? But also we have this building that sits not far from us that we're talking about turning into a trade center. And there's a lot of energy around that. So I'm talking to people about, I keep telling these guys, you can make a killing in the trades right now.
Absolutely.
You could make a killing just cleaning up at a job site, let alone one of the trades. But how do we get them into a place where they can begin to get some kind of certification, and we start to network with, different construction companies to take them in and stuff like that. So there's no typical day. I want to work with hospitals. Henry Ford's creating this massive new hospital, and they're going to need entry-level porters and dietitians and things like that. So how do we start networking with them so our guys have a place, can get an employment from them if they need to. And
then who runs the day-to-day operations over there?
I have a team of 37 people between the two places. And, Joe Phillip is the director of operations. He kind of oversees the bridge housing, and Benny Asaf runs and manages the day center where we do the kind of basic needs stuff at the church.
Got it. So the next real mountain is you've created the bridge. Now the bridge goes to from the street to housing. We got to create this. We got to create places for them to live next. And so, what was your line? How hard can it be?
How hard can it be?
So you're going to figure it out?
Yeah. I mean, I continue to trust that. I talk to you. I talk to your listeners. Somebody out there, I'm not smart enough to come up with solutions, but somebody's got one or has a way of doing things that we haven't thought of before. But there's a lot of people that are interested. We've got a great board of trustees. We've got a great base of donors and supporters and volunteers that, continually say, what can I do to help? And boy, if you say that to me, I'm going to give you an assignment. Yeah.
That was one thing that I said when Nadine and I went down. I said, we're in. What do we need to do? And you said, show up at the gala. You gotta come to the gala. And so we went this year, and you held that at Ford Field, and you raised $2 million.
$2,048,000.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So talk about that, and how does the funding of that work? Does Ford donate the field to you that day and everything? Is that how that all works, or do you pay for the?
Yeah. So this is our 9th year, I think, of doing galas. So this is our 1, 2, 3, 4.
So you were doing galas even before you had the Bridge Center. You were still doing it for the day housing, or the day center.
Yeah, I did a kind of a strategic plan for raising private dollars, and so we had a kind of comprehensive approach.
Okay,
to gala was part of that.
Okay,
we started with, I think there was 200 people, and I think we raised $200,000 the first year. And then we ended up over on Ford Field. No, they discount it for us, and the lines have been phenomenal. Yeah. They've been great to work with. Sheila Ford Hamp has been a great friend and supporter, and most of that money comes from corporate sponsorship. So we have our sponsors of the evening. Lear was our presenting sponsor this year, and it goes down from there. But we just continue to build upon our success. Being on Ford Field is fun. You get to be actually on the field. You wear tennis shoes with your suit and dresses, and people have it's a fun evening. We had Jake Bates was there this year, our Lions kicker, who, kicked a few balls and took pictures, and, he was delightful to be with. And we honored Roger Penske this year. And as you know, we had, Jim Farley from Ford and Mark Royce from GM present to him, and then have a little fireside chat after that. So it was interesting to hear from those guys and hear why they support what we're doing, and how important it is as corporate leaders to be community partners, to be invested in the community.
What I love about it too is that it's not just for the mega donor, though. I mean, if you start at that level, obviously you've got them, and that's a fantastic base. But you walk in, and there's people from the middle market, like Gene Lovasco and his wife. Right. You walk in, and there's a room that they had actually donated. I think it's the assembly or activity room there. But then even just anybody who's an individual can go sign up. You've got your website. you run it like a company, which is what I love. You've got sign up is online, very easy to volunteer anytime. It's got all the different time slots. And any small organization could come to you and have a handful of people come down at a time and help out. What other ways that people can engage?
Signing up and volunteering is a big part of it. And if people want to come down and tour the center, we offer tours all the time so they get a firsthand look at what we're doing and decide whether or not they want to be involved and how they want to be involved. But you're right. Like I really believe, like I value the $10 donor as much as I do the $200,000 donor. I really do, because, I get these, sometimes it's just cash in an envelope from these, elderly folks, and you can tell by their handwriting that they're up in age. But, it's the widow's mite, right? It's the story of Jesus saying that widow gave more from her need than the guys that put the big dollars in. So like I try to always honor all of our donors as being critical to what we're doing. Like no donation is too small and none is too big.
Yeah.
But that's what, when we, this is my mantra from the time we started this, when we all do what we can, when we all participate, that's where the miracles happen.
Absolutely.
And it takes all of us. It takes our volunteers, it takes our donors, it takes the church, the city, the business community, all kind of coming together and making this miracle happen.
It's awesome. I do love the stories though, where certain executive gave however many millions of dollars and then still says, where's the vacuum? Like I want to go to work.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That was Jim Dublutsky. He's the president and CEO of Ford Land, the real estate branch of Ford Motor Company. Okay. Big. It's huge. And, I've never done anything like this before. So I'm kind of making it up as I go. And he came in for a tour and he's like, I think we can help you activate this building. And I didn't have a clue as how to activate the building once we got it built, because we're pretty close to being done at that time. And I was like, had I known what I didn't know, I mean, I would have been on the curb today still trying to figure out how to make this happen. But Jim brought in this team, his team of people, and they took over and they brought in like furniture that was in our warehouses. He provided the furniture for our offices and for our dining room. And like, he just continued to because that's what he does, right?
Right.
He activates buildings. And so like things that I would have never thought. And then they came in after the construction was done and started cleaning. And so one day I walked in like 7:30 in the morning and like, I'm going to my office and he's out there with a vacuum cleaner vacuuming. And I was like, Jim, like I can get somebody to do this. And he was like, no. Like I'm here to do this. And he said, for two reasons. He said, one, I like to vacuum, which is like, maybe his wife is listening right now and she may not know that. But two, he said, I lead by example. And he said, if I walk through our building and I pick up a piece of trash and people see me doing that, people are going to start picking up trash when they see it. Like he goes, I lead by example and I don't mind helping at this level and doing this. And he's always been that way. And they, like I said at the gala, like nobody has rolled up their sleeves and gotten into the operations more than us. And I mean, that's one tiny thing, but his team has come through. And for example, the polar vortex, when we bring in an emergency shelter, like we have a gymnasium with a nice basketball court flooring, and they come in on a Saturday morning, give up their Saturday morning, and they put down a flooring on top of it to keep it from getting marred up.
Yeah.
And then we can bring in cots and on top of that and bring people in. So, and they do that every time. And they thank me for being able to come in and help out.
That's great.
It's amazing. Yeah.
You know what though? I mean, but you get what you give. I mean, you thanked me for, calling you and interrupting your workout and coming in and being with my family. But, oh yeah, there you go. But no, I mean, you do exactly what you think, what you said was so great about what Jim did and these other people that you respect is that, I mean, you just live it and then you attract it. And so, I mean, I think that's the beautiful part of your story is that you keep living it and the attraction comes back to you with with the blessings that you're bringing to others. So it's just unbelievable.
Well, that's nice to hear. I mean, I do believe as a priest, as a Jesuit priest, that I'm supposed to give away my life's energy. And when I do that, I'm blessed. And so I'm very lucky.
I didn't ask this. I was going to, and we're just about to wrap up, but what's it mean to be a Jesuit? Because being Catholic, you definitely hear some different. There's these different factions, right? That I don't necessarily understand. But is it that what are the Jesuits known for?
Okay,
and why are they so wonderful, at least in your eyes?
So there are different groups that of religious orders, like the nuns, and they all were founded by somebody. So like the Dominicans were founded by St. Dominic, and the Franciscans and the Capuchins were founded by St. Francis. So the Jesuits were founded by St. Ignatius of Loyola, and he has his own story, but he discovered through his conversion and through his life what he called the spiritual exercise. He gave the church spiritual exercise, and that is a process of entering into the gospel message and kind of discerning how God is working in the world and in our lives. So that's what the Jesuits are kind of known for. But we're mostly known in the United States for being educators. So we have 28 universities, 17 universities, 28 traditional high schools, and a slew of other like non-traditional high schools, nativity schools, which are like middle school. And so you would know a lot of them, right? Georgetown, Boston College, Creighton, Marquette, University of Detroit Mercy. But I discovered when I was doing some humanitarian aid work in El Salvador during the Civil War, and I met the Jesuits down there. And
they're not that old. You mean their Civil War?
Their Civil War.
I'm just kidding.
I feel old to be a part of our 7 days. But I met the Jesuits down there, and they were really extraordinary men who were really putting their lives on the line, and actually did. Like they ended up, 6 of them were murdered by the government for standing with the poor. And
really?
So when I met them and I heard their story and what they were doing, I was like, I want to be a part of this. And so I came back and got my degree at University of Detroit, the Jesuit school, and got to know them there. Right after that, I started running the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, which was run by the Jesuits, or sponsored by the Jesuits, but a domestic Peace Corps, so people could work in nonprofits across the country. And I started reading about their documents, and I fell in love with what I was reading. It was how I prayed, and it's how I understood the world. It was like, it became who I was. And so there came a point where my daughter Mary was independent from me. She was off to school and university, and I was still young enough that I walked over there one day and said, I think I want to join you guys. And
wow.
The rest is history.
How cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for everything you do. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for what you've done for my family. I hope that we're lifelong friends, and
me too,
that we, that I can drive value to what you're doing and participate in any way that I can, and encourage others to do the same. So
thank you, Matt.
You're welcome. Thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
This episode of the BLTNT podcast is sponsored by Oxium, business IT and cybersecurity designed to outsmart chaos. And powered by Juniper Networks. Automate your network with Juniper Networks and the Mist AI platform, the world's first AI-driven wired and wireless network.